You brethren are superchargers, super troopers. They used to threaten our lives to get us to come back in after they gave us a break in the service. Y'all are anxious. Let's jump on this. Where did we start? Verse 18, right? Of course, he prays on the behalf of Israel there. Pardon, I beseech thee, iniquity of this people, according to the greatness of thy mercy. And the Lord said, I have pardoned according to thy word, but as truly I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened unto my voice, surely they shall not see the land which I swear unto their fathers. Neither shall any of them that provoked me see it. Now, brethren, I don't know if you mark your Bibles, but verse 22 is one that I would mark. I'd want to remember that, they saw the miracles. So if you have Pentecostal friends or something, they're always needing the confirmation of the Word, that is not how it works. The miracles were but for one thing. What was that about? Remember? They were to show that the people spake as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. They were to confirm the Word. But when that which is perfect is come, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, that which was in part, and he just got through explaining in chapter 12, and in the beginning of before that in chapter 13, that we had these miracles of knowledge, we had these miracles of preaching and so forth. They were all in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then there'll be no need for those. And then he'd talk about faith, love, and hope. That was what would abide. And of course, we understand that the miraculous age is over. But you'll have some people, even like myself, thought, boy, wouldn't that be a great thing? Well, not so much. It wasn't great for these people. Notice verse 24, the exception, my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him. How did he have another spirit? Think about that for a minute. Are you a Calvinist? Do you believe the Spirit jumped on him and got a hold of him? Did he have an unction out in the field while he was plowing? By the way, that's what they teach. You can't even know about God. You can't understand the Bible. You can't even read the Bible correctly unless you've had an unction, unless the Spirit has come upon you and changed your heart. One of the ways they just destroy the book of Romans. How did Caleb have a different spirit? What was his spirit? Why was his spirit different? Yes, that's it. Right. It wasn't that he was built any different than these men, or that God did something to him, some kind of, as Pastor Parsley would do when he could see the Holy Spirit moving through the audience in the upper deck. Oh, give me a break, acting like the Holy Spirit's some kind of electric charge or some oozy gooey stuff that flows in and out of people. That's not how that works, and it's just a shame. So these people saw the miracles. They saw all the things that these folks today want to say that they can do, and yet it didn't keep them faithful. They're not going to see the land, but Caleb is going to. Now the Amalekites and the Canaanites dwelt in the valley, is a parenthetical statement we get in verse 25. Tomorrow turn you and get into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea. And we're going to run into even more difficulties, aren't we? Because the way is going to be pretty tough. The Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, How long shall I bear with this evil congregation which murmur against me? I have heard the murmurings of the children of Israel which they murmur against me. As I truly live and have spoken, I will do to you. Your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and all that were numbered of you, according to your whole number, from 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. Doubtless ye shall not come into the land concerning which I swear unto you. But verse 31, your little ones, which you said would be a prey. Remember, that's what they said. You brought us out here that our women and our children would be prey. He said, the ones that you said would be a prey, them will I bring in, and they shall know the land where you have despised and rejected me. But as for you, your carcasses, they shall fall in the wilderness, and your children shall wander in the wilderness 40 years, and bear your whoredoms until your carcasses be wasted in the wilderness. After the number of the days in which you search the land, even 40 days, a day for a year, shall ye bear your iniquities, even 40 years, and ye shall know my breach of promise. The Lord, I said, and surely I will do this unto all this evil congregation. Boy, that's just terrible, isn't it? So close. Yet so far. Just send a recon mission, up into reconnoiter, up into, but come back, we can't do it. After they'd seen all the things. I mean, God took the most powerful army on the face of the earth and defeated it. And they didn't lift a bow. They didn't lift a sword. And remember, we're not many days, okay, a year plus, but still that's not that long a time since they'd seen that. But the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying that, okay. Notice verse 36, and the men which Moses sent to search the land had returned and made all the congregation to murmur against him by bringing up a slander upon the land. Even those men that did bring up the evil report upon the land died by the plague before the Lord. Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, of course, did not. They lived, and Moses told these sayings unto all the children of Israel, and the people mourned greatly. And they do what they're just got a habit of doing, right? They don't listen. They rose up early in the morning and said, look, we can go do this. We've sinned. We're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. Well, it's too late. And Moses said, why or wherefore do you transgress the commandment of the Lord? It's not going to work. It shall not prosper. Go not up. The Lord is not among you. You'll be smitten before your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites are there before you, and you shall fall by the sword, because you are turned away from the Lord. Therefore the Lord will not be with you. And boom. But they presumed to go unto. The idea there is of headless, reckless abandonment. Just no care or attention. Just this is what we're going to do. Our mind's made up, and here we go. And of course they go, and well, it doesn't work for them. Then the Amalekites came down, the Canaanites which dwelt in the hill, and smote them and discomforted them even unto Hormah. So it went just as Moses said it would go. Why are you doing this? And of course they're destroyed. But I mean, it's right up par with what we've been doing the whole time, right? So let's check out our questions there on chapter 14. When the Israelites heard the evil report of the 10 spies, they lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night till they also murmured against Moses and Aaron. They accused the Lord of making their wives and children to be as what? Prey. And then you got a little circle there. Which one do you believe? They did or did not appoint themselves a captain over them? Yeah, Brother Lewis was kind enough to put Nehemiah's reference there, right? Because that's where because it doesn't say right there in the text, does it? Now, who are the two fellows that tried to persuade the people not to rebel against the Lord? Joshua and Caleb. God threatened to smite the people with what? Pestilence. Disinherit them and make what? A nation mightier than they. He's going to do it through Moses, wasn't he? Notice 71 there, making plea unto the Lord. Who was the mediator? Who stepped in? Moses. 72, punishment pronounced upon Israel and all that had been numbered from 20 years and old. What were they going to do when they come into the land? They would wander in the wilderness 40 years. 10 spies who brought the evil report did what? Died in the plague. How many of you knew that before you went through those questions? I tell you what, brethren, it's amazing to me how many times I can read. I have read, and this is not a joke, I have read Genesis, I think it was in chapter 43, 44. I know 100 times. I've probably I'm going to end up reading it 10 times this quarter. But anyway, did you know, if you knew this, then you got me, that Joseph put his brothers in jail for 3 days? Did you know that? All of them. Well, I guess I'm just stupid, because I don't know how many times I've read that. And it says right there he put them in ward. Well, I never really stopped long enough because, I'm trying to get through the reading. And that's not one of those bullet points you'd make. But boy, that really helps me now with the fact that Judah is just so animate with his father when he says, look, the man clearly said, well, he had 3 days in the county Hooskow, to think about what he said. I don't know. And I thought, well, I cannot believe that I haven't read that and retained that. I knew I'd read it, but actually understood they were in jail for 3 days. And then he keeps one of them, right? Remember Simeon? Yeah, Larry.
Do you have any thoughts on that 20 years old? That was kind of a cutoff point for him, that anybody that was 20 years or younger, he didn't hold them accountable for.
Yeah, Larry, I think I probably got the same thoughts you do. Go ahead and articulate it.
Well, I'm just thinking, is that kind of a point where at 20 years old, you're old enough to know better, and so that's kind of the point. After 20, you're kind of responsible for your own actions.
What is that famous title of what we're talking about? It's not in the Bible. Age of accountability. How old are you? I'm 19. Okay, I can use 17 though. How many 17-year-olds you know that know anything, right? Now I'll tell you, when I was 17, I knew everything. Absolutely, everything. 18, well on my way to omniscience. About 25, I realized, boy, I ain't got. And now, every day, I wake up and going, I don't know anything, Yeah, very, very humbling. But Larry, I have the same thoughts. And I would use that too, if somebody's obeyed the gospel or something at 12 or 13 or 14, not saying you can't do that, but some people are so upset that their children haven't obeyed the gospel when they're 10 or 11. And I think, let's think about, because how does the New Testament even describe somebody who's 30 years old? They don't look at him like we do. We'd say that's a grown man, wouldn't we? But they kind of refer to people under 40 as young people, I do too now, but when I was 38, 39, I wouldn't have. I thought, man, I'm a grown man. But they kind of looked at age a little bit differently. That's one of the things, David. When you read the story of David, you think David was 13. And chances are he was probably already, maybe 20. He was much older because they just didn't look at age the way we do. At least in my little world, how I've looked at age. But yeah, I have the same thoughts, Larry. 20-year-old, it seems to be a pretty good indication that God says those 19 and so forth really didn't have a say in the matter, really didn't understand all the implications of what they were saying or doing. How far I would push that? Rather than if I can't give you a thus saith the Lord in a book, chapter, and verse on something, I'm real hesitant to say, could that be an implication? Absolutely. But could it not be? I think it could not be as well. So that's why I wouldn't want to, really push that. But yeah, same things here. All right, chapter 15. Lord spake unto Moses, saying, speaking to the children of Israel, saying to them, when you come to the land of your habitation, which I give unto you, you will make an offering by fire. Wow. Is that a change of subject or what? Here we go, man. We're getting into a lot of the liturgy, the Levites and the priests and what they're going to be doing. So they're going to be offering up offerings. And so some things that jumped out of my mind, verse 16, notice, well, I guess we need to back up and set up a little bit of context with that. Verse 14, and if a stranger sojourn with you, and whosoever be among you in your generations, and will offer an offering made by fire, a sweet savor, you do, so shall he do. One ordinance shall be for both you of the congregation and for the stranger that sojourneth with you. So same thing they're going to offer, whether you're Israelite or not. One law and one manner shall be for you and for the stranger that sojourneth with you. And so this just, we have to remind ourselves from time to time, what kind of government was Israel under? Theocracy, right. But the Bible, what Moses is writing here, is also going to be their civil law. Now, our founding fathers, a lot of them had a real problem with that. Not Israel. But at the time, they'd come out from England. Do you know what the reigning church was at that time in England? It was the Church of England. Church of England had, and who was over the Church of England? The king or the queen, yeah. And so it had a hierarchy. And our guys didn't like the whole idea, you know, a lot of them, of the church having the same law, because let's think, man, when you was in Pennsylvania, or if you didn't go to church on Sunday, the, what do you call those guys? A constable could come by and arrest you, you know, unless you had a good excuse. You missed a couple of the services, they'd fine you, because they said the church law was the law of the land. And so it kind of pushed people to try to fight against about Thomas Paine. I don't know if he'd been half the jerk he was if it hadn't been for trying to show that the Bible is not the last law of the land. What he was trying to say is you've got a different law than the Bible, and we need to keep those two separate. And so that's why you have a lot of our founding fathers were what was called deists. And that is, they weren't stupid enough to say there's no God, but they didn't want God active in our lives and telling us what to do each step of the way, okay? They wanted to have a separation of the laws of the land and a separation of the laws of the church. Spinoza was a Jewish philosopher, terrible guy. And by that I mean I didn't know him. That's a long time ago. But he was arguing against, because the Jews said that God's law was the law that they had to obey, and he didn't like that, and so he was fighting against that. He, of course, was in Europe, I believe. And so he was, everything's allegory, you know, and didn't really mean what it says. And so you run across that, and so it's good to know a little bit about that when you're having to deal with that. But in the theocracy, what he's saying there is if you got somebody that's living with you, they're a sojourner, they're going to be under the same law you're under, and they're going to have to give the same kind of gifts and so forth that you give. And then in verse 17, the Lord spake unto Moses, speak unto the children of Israel, saying to them, when you come into the land wherewith I bring you, when you eat of the bread of the land, you shall offer up an heave offering. Now, heave really has the idea of raising up your hand, okay? A heave offering. And so that's why, you know, when you see that, you kind of think of that. And I want to really pay attention to verse 22 and following. And if ye have erred, and not observed all these commandments which the Lord spoken unto Moses, even all the Lord hath commanded you by the hand of Moses, from the day the Lord commanded Moses, and henceforth among your generations, then it shall be, if aught be committed by ignorance, without the knowledge of the congregation, then all the congregation shall offer an offering. And notice verse 25. And the priest shall make an atonement for all the congregation of the children of Israel, and it shall be forgiven them, for it is in ignorance. Verse 26. And it shall be forgiven all the congregation of the children of Israel, and the stranger that sojourneth among them, seeing all the people were in ignorance. Verse 27. And if any soul, individual now, sin through ignorance, then he shall bring a she-goat of the first year for a sin offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for the soul that sinneth ignorantly, when he sinneth by ignorance. Now, brethren, what I want you to see all that, verse 29 continues that on. Sinneth through ignorance, both him and that is born among the children of Israel. There have been things in my life that I have found out later, you know. I mean, there are things that I preached on 30 years ago that, well, I've changed my attitude towards that to some degree. The whole idea of being a Christian and walking and growing and adding the fruit of the spirits and adding the Christian graces is that you mature. That's the natural process. Now, the Hebrew writer kind of gets on them folks, because the time that you ought to be teachers, one hath need to teach you again the rudiments, first principles of the gospel of Christ. I'm not blessing ignorance, but what I'm trying to want you to think about is that if they had a sin of ignorance, if they had a sacrifice for the sin of ignorance in the old covenant, don't you think the blood of Jesus could handle the same thing? Now, it's got to be, you know, it's ignorance. Brethren, I never thought about the fruit of the vine, you know. You know, that was a thing for a long time. And I'm just using this as an example, and please don't, you know. But some brethren used alcohol, you know, on the Lord's table. In fact, maybe you'll find it surprising, Brother Woods didn't have a problem with it. And, you know, a lot of us think Guy in Woods hung the moon. But, and I remember arguing with a brother about that because I was like, the congregation where I first started preaching, they had used beverage alcohol, you know. I mean, they had the real stuff. Because one of the ladies, her mom made it. And when I started preaching against it, well, you know where that put me with her, right? And so me and this fella were arguing about it. He was one of the teachers, and he said, Brother Gilbert, anybody with 20 minutes in the concordance ought to know better than that. And I said, Hoger, I don't know that anybody here in the congregation besides maybe 2 people have a concordance or would even know how to use one. Brethren, I tell you what, one of the best books I ever bought was How to Study the New Testament by Guy in Woods, and I went and bought every book he said get. I didn't have a concordance, and then I bought a concordance, and then lo and behold, Judy Hillis told me Jim Lewis didn't use that, and so I had to go buy another concordance. That's a true story. I'd got a Strong's, and she said, well, Brother Lewis don't use Strong's. He uses Young's. And I thought, well, I guess I'll get one of them too, you know. But so I didn't have a concordance when I obeyed the gospel. Didn't know what one was. Listen, I've taken Hebrew, I've taken Greek, and I like to play with it. I try to do it every day. I don't know Hebrew. I mean, I don't know the language. I couldn't strike up Hebrew language with you. But in that 2 years that I did that, I learned how to use tools. That's what your master's degree, your post-hole diggers, that's what that's for. You're not going to retain everything there is to know about something. But what you do learn is how to answer, where to get the information to write about a subject or to talk about a subject. You learn how to use your tools. And so he was arguing that they should have known better than to use alcohol, you know, on the table. And brethren, every time that the Lord's Supper is talked about, what does it talk about being in the cup? It doesn't call it wine, does it? What's it called every time? Fruit of the vine. To me, that's a whole lot better argument than, you know, somebody having a concordance. And that's one of the reasons, brethren, it hurts my soul to sing some of the songs we sing about bless the bread and the wine, you know. I'm like, it's because people will get the wrong impression about that. And is wine grape juice? Is the fruit of the vine wine? Well, it depends. Yes. I mean, because wine it's in the grape, you know, in Isaiah. But when we use a term like that, because when I obeyed the gospel, Mad Dog 2020 is what I thought of when they thought of wine. Or that's MD, Mogan David. For those, oh, you know, I'm glad y'all don't know that. Boone's Farm. I mean, that was wine, you know. That was what wine was. Welch's grape juice wasn't wine. Come on. And so when people's trying to tell me you're not supposed to drink wine, I'm like, yeah, that you know. But anyway, because the way we've grown up, the way I was raised, wine always had alcohol. You know, you can go to the store and buy grape juice. Nobody called that wine. If they's going to the store to get wine, go ahead, Jim, fire in there.
What comes out of a wine press?
Grape juice, yeah. Do you know that's why we have Welch's grape juice? Isn't it sad that in this country you couldn't even buy grape juice that wasn't fermented? There was a Methodist preacher. His last name was Welch. And he was sick and tired of trying to do everything he could to try to have grape juice that wasn't intoxicating. And so he started growing his own grapes, making unfermented, you know, bottling it. And boy, aren't we glad. Aren't we glad? Because that, you know, true story, look it up if you don't believe me. Because that sounds like something a preacher would make up, don't it? But no, that's, you know, brethren, that's just a thing. So do I think that those brethren at Cold Springs 120 years ago die and go to hell because they was using a little cup with alcohol in it, you know? No. I think if there's a sin of ignorance in the Old Testament, then there's blood of Christ. There's sin. They didn't do it to be defiant before God. They were not presumptuous, but when they saw the word wine, or the cup, that's what they were thinking. Now, I may be totally wrong with that, but that's where I am when it comes to things you just don't know. But once you do know, what do you got to do? We didn't use it when I got there. Although I will tell you something, them brethren bought their Welch's grape juice in little bottles like this. I thought, well, that's pretty good. Keep it fresh. They had 5 cases. And they'd only use 1 bottle a week. So we had some stuff in there stuff was floating in it. You would chew it sometimes instead. I'm going like, boy, I don't know. This might not be fermented, but it can't be far from it, Maybe we need it. So I ended up throwing all that out and got us some fresh. That was just amazing to me. But sins of ignorance, I think that's a huge in chapter.
The fact that they did not have a written word. I mean, you could, like you said, you can't retain all that in your head. We don't have as much an excuse, I guess.
Right, yeah. That's right.
So there almost had to be something for the ignorant sin, I guess.
You had the Levites, their job is to know the law and to teach the law, and they're going to be scattered throughout all the communities. But yeah, you're right. Well, and now the totally opposite. We're going to go from these folks that didn't know any better to what we'd all say, well, that's just flat out wrong. Verse 30, but the soul that doeth aught presumptuously, whether he be born in the land or a stranger, the same reproacheth the Lord, and that soul shall be cut off from among his people. That's totally different. That guy needs to repent. He needs to quit doing what he's doing. Verse 32, and while the children of Israel were in the wilderness, they found a man that gathered sticks upon the Sabbath day. That's a little bit deceiving, isn't it? If you read a little bit more into that, because when I think of a man gathering up sticks, I'm thinking of somebody's going out to get some twigs and stuff, to try to break up some kindling, right? But the idea is working. He's probably doing a little bit more than gathering just little twigs. He's probably gathering up like we would brick of wood or something, And so they find him and they say, hey, we found this guy picking up sticks. I tell you what, we got all this high dollar stuff. Why don't we use it, right? What verse is that? Somebody help me out. What chapter is that? Chapter 15, verse 33. Let's see if we can't. I never did hook up to the internet. See what the definition, gathering, pick up, symbol, okay, sticks. It says trees. It's from the, let's see, yitz, trees, copse, timber, the wood, hard and fibrous trees. So this appears to be a little bit more than just some fella. That's from BDAG. Brown, Driver, and Briggs, trees and wood, and so probably a little bit more. When I first time I read it, I thought that's pretty rough. Fella picks up a couple sticks, a couple twigs, and they're going to stone him to death. But there's more to it than that. And what were you not supposed to do? You weren't supposed to what on the Sabbath? Work. Okay, so there's a chance that he's out there probably doing what he does, and so look at it that way. I think it helps explain the result. And they put him in ward, and there's that thing that helped me remember Joseph putting his brothers in there, because it was not declared what should be done to him. They didn't know really what should be the punishment. So the Lord said unto Moses, the man shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones without the camp. And all the congregation brought him without the camp and stoned him with stones as he died, as the Lord commanded. That's pretty rough, ain't it? Pretty rough way to go. Any thoughts on that? Boy, y'all are... Oh, that's right. Yeah, brother. Yes, sir. That's the context, isn't it? That's exactly. Yeah, I believe so. Well, I definitely. Yes, he's the one that gave because they didn't know what to do with him, right? Because it hadn't been written down yet, So That was a good point you made, Jeff, about the written word. And so they want to know, what are we supposed to do with this man? The Lord says, and so, boy, I tell you what, that's written in stone from henceforth, right? Yeah. And you know, brethren, sometimes that's what the punishment's for. One of my favorite shows, because that's what I wanted to do if I hadn't been a preacher. My wife wouldn't let me do it. But I wanted to be a policeman. Came out of the Army, I wanted to be a cop. She was like, no. You want me or you want to be a cop? And I was like, both? No. And so I wasn't allowed to do that. So here I am. But anyway, homicide, I just think that's, you know, speaking for those who can't speak for themselves. Well, I'm absolutely amazed at how many times these guys are looking for a suspect, and the suspect's gotten out of prison. He's already killed somebody. And I'm like, why not? You know, if you can kill somebody and 7 years later you're back out, you got your creds built up or whatever that makes you the man or whatever you think you are. Just, whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man's hand shall his blood be shed. Not 22 years later, not 30 years later. Brethren, we've gotten away from that, and it is killing us. We have no respect for law and order. If they would take a man once he's convicted and they take him out and put him on the gallows or whatever it is and let it be done and it's over. But no. And by appeals courts, and then this guy didn't wear deodorant the day he was arraigned, you know, so, you know, because he stunk, he got worse. You know, what the excuses that some of these lawyers have come up with, brethren, we're guarantee you picking up sticks on the Sabbath was not an issue after this day. Notice, speaking of the children of Israel, now here we're right the opposite. We're going to be talking about putting ribands of blue. And that word there is patil. In the Hebrew, it means a thread or a cord or a line, whether it was stitched into the hem or what. But the Jews kind of upped that a notch, you know. In fact, they took a lot of the things in the law. And now you'll see some of their robes have these big, huge bands of blue around them. Now, it was part of the law. They were supposed to wear a cord, this ribbon of blue. But I want you to realize that could have been a thread that was just sewn into the actual. It could have been a cord, could have been a line. We're not given exact details. But it wasn't to be so prominent. And the idea of the frontlet between your eyes and the wearing it on their hands, that you'll see the phylacteries that the Pharisees would wear, that is what we call figures of speech. You know, the law is to be a frontlet before your eyes. In other words, you're supposed to keep it in mind, not have a box on your head with some law written in it, and to have it on your doorpost as you walk in the house. They actually have little things. And you're really conservative or Orthodox Jews will have little tubes on the doorway, even in the house, where they have little pieces of Torah written and stuck down in it. And that's not the idea. Let that house, that home that you're going into, be surrounded by, be immersed in the Word, you know, what takes up place there. And yet they took these metaphors, this idea, and turned them into literal things, and then went out and stole widows' houses and had blood on their hands. One of the reasons Jesus so upset with that whole, well, notice verse 30, and it shall be a fringe that they may look upon it, remember all the commandments of the Lord, and do them, and that you see not after your own heart and your own eyes. That's it, right? That is it. That's it with Christianity. It's a surrender of self to say, you know, God says I've got to do this. And sometimes, you know, I don't want to do that. But you know what? As a slave, as a servant of Jesus Christ, you know, I don't know if y'all ever watched the movie Gladiator, but there's a phrase that his servant uses. He asks him, you know, about a particular thing, and the slave says, sometimes I do what I want to do, and other times I do what I have to do. You know, as a slave of Jesus, what am I going to do on Sunday morning? You know? If the congregation, if the elders have said we're going to have worship service at such and such time, what am I going to do? I'm going to follow what the Lord has said. I'm going to submit myself to the local congregation, and if the elders say be here at a certain time, I'm going to be there. No question. I want to surrender myself because it's not about me. Seek not after your own heart and your own eyes, after which, you go whoring, that you may remember and do all my commandments and be holy unto your God. I am the Lord your God, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God. What a beautiful statement. Let's answer these questions real quick. We're on chapter 15. They would come into which God gave them, and so the law of the offering for the children of Israel was what? The law of the stranger who sojourned with them, the law of the offering of the God of the children of Israel was, what do y'all have? Same, right? There was no differences. One who acts or sins blank would be cut off from his people. Presumptuously. If you look that up, the New American Standard used that, who does anything defiantly. The ASB and the ESV, and I like the idea because I looked it up, it's two different Hebrew words. The first word is yod, it means hand. And I thought, well, how in the world did they get presumptuously out of hand? But, got to keep reading, right? The next word is high. So anybody does something with a high hand. So, okay, they're talking about, in other words, you know better. And so that's why the ASB and ESV translates that to act with a high hand, to do anything defiantly. In other words, this is what I'm going to do, like it or not. The man who gathered sticks on the Sabbath was stoned by the congregation, and he what? Died. That stoning thing, that's always been, I thought, pretty rough, right? They're worthy of death, so how else would you do it? I guess you could use a sword. The idea of stoning, though, you have a lot more people involved, don't you? When a firing squad would go out, there's 5 men generally in a firing squad, and everybody has a rifle, and all of them have bullets, but only one guy has a real bullet. And you don't know. You get the rifle as you go out to do your job. And so 4 of the guys are not firing bullets. They're firing blanks. Okay? And so when you fire, and why do you think they would do that? You didn't know who it was, right? You didn't know who the one, you simply carrying out your duty, and I appreciate that. That's, in a prison type, in the service, when they were executing people, nobody had blanks. They were all shooting. But that stoning, you got a lot of people involved, and everybody's kind of doing it. Do you know what they say about some of the Jews when they really wanted to carry something, make it prolong? You know what they would do in the stoning? You ever read anything about that? They would use little rocks. Use little rocks. And so why would they do that? Yeah. Take it out. I would ask that old boy if he didn't mind grabbing that big old boulder over there, and he would just drop it on my head, I'd like to get this done pretty quick. 77, a fringe on their garments with a ribbon of blue would cause the children of Israel to remember what? All of God's commandments, and to do what? Do them for the purpose of being holy, separated. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and jump in there on 16. Well, you know what? We can lay the groundwork, can't we? Korah. I'll tell you what, let's read about Korah, but let's go all the way back to the New Testament. Let's go to the book of Jude. We're just about leaving it, ain't we? If you go to the book of Jude. Let's read Jude verse 11. Remember, Jude likes to work in threes, right? Woe unto them, for they have gone in the way of Cain. We know how that worked out, right? Cain did what? Killed his brother. And oh boy, here's another illustration we get to go through probably next time we come together. And ran greedily after the error of Balaam for reward, and perished in the gainsaying of Korah. There's our man. Yep. Jude's using him as an illustration of what not to do. Okay, you'll notice there's a big difference in the spelling. Don't let that freak you out. But that's what he's talking about. Back now to number 16. Now Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi. Now he's a Levite, not a priest. Remember, in order to be a priest, you had to be a direct descendant of who? Aaron. But they were Levites. They were given to the priests as workers. You know, they were the ones that's going to be hauling the furniture and stuff of that nature, but they were not priests. But this is not making Kohath happy. And Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliah, and On, the sons of Peleth, the sons of Reuben, took men. And they rose up before Moses with certain of the children of Israel, 250 princes of the assembly. That's a big group now. Famous in the congregation, men of renown. And they gathered themselves together against Moses and against Aaron, and said, You take too much upon you, seeing all the congregation are holy, every one of them. And the Lord is among them. Wherefore then lift ye yourselves up above the congregation of the Lord. And here goes Moses, doing what he's been doing a lot of, fell upon his face. And he spake unto Korah and unto the company, saying, Even tomorrow the Lord will show you who are his, and who is holy, and will cause him to come near unto him, even him of whom he hath chosen will he come near. This do, take ye censers, Korah, and all his company, and put fire therein. Well, let's just stop there for a moment. A censer. What is a censer? Any of y'all look that up? Fire pan. Yeah, that's what I'd call it. Yeah. If you look it up, because I wanted to know, because how many guys are here right now? 250. And I thought, well, so there must have been a household use for this, right? Wouldn't you think? But I couldn't find anything. If any of y'all have an opportunity to find something, I mean,
I just looked up, said a bronze man.
yeah. So I guess everybody probably had one like to deal with hot coals and stuff. You know, you reckon, because they're going to take and they're going to melt these, you know, after the fact. But I would have thought there had been more on that. Like, I've even got several books on Jewish lifestyle, you know. And I thought there would be more to that. Because if you look up censer, what you're going to see most of the time, y'all have seen the Catholic services, right? The little cool little billy bong, you know, they burn incense in and wave it back and forth on the chain. That's not at all what you see happening here. This is, like Brother Lewis said, a fire pan. And so they're going to bring theirs, 250 of them now. That's a lot. So you know everybody must have had one. They're going to bring them. That's what they're required to bring. I was just surprised there wasn't more extra biblical writing on censer, but it's pretty much always talking about in Scripture the thing that's used to offer up something by the priests. But these guys are not priests, are they? So I'm like, okay, well they must. I wondered why they had one, is what I was thinking. And then with Brother Lewis just saying fire pan, which of course is what it is, then that would be something you'd have, you know. You might need to go to a neighbor's house and get a coal, you know, so you can come back, start your fire again if it went out or something.
I wonder where all this metal stuff came from. I mean, it almost had to be given to them by the Egyptians.
Oh yeah, man, they cleaned house. Yeah.
And yet they, like brass poles, serpents, gold
Yeah.
backs,
And think about all the gold and junk, shouldn't say that, the tabernacle. I mean, just when they start bringing stuff in back in Exodus, remember they finally had to tell them, look, stop, you know, we've got more than we can deal with, so they're going to use that acacia wood, but everything's going to be covered in all this gold. And the fact that they're hauling this stuff for 40 years, and we're going to see they get pretty ticked off here in this next chapter because the way is hard. And man, you've seen that area. You can imagine what it'd be like trying to get cattle and horses and wheels are through there are just walking. But brethren, our time is gone, and so we're going to jump back in here at chapter 16, even though I think we got a real good jump on it. And we will meet again next week. But just keep in mind that we will not meet the week of the 22nd, I think it is. That's going. Joel will have 2 hours that night, so it probably won't be as bad as this 2 hours have been, but it's still 2 hours. That's a long time, right? All right, brethren. Let's have a closing prayer, and Josh, would you be kind enough?